Hi there, thank you very much for watching this video. So today we're in the month of September 2024. So in this video I'll be exploring what is the best language to develop in for my needs. So what exactly are my needs? Well, mainly I'm looking to develop mobile apps for the mobile phone, but I'd like to be using WebView in order to perhaps build a web application using HTML and JavaScript, and perhaps with some kind of back-end functionality that I can build that is not provided by the JavaScript within HTML, such as, for example, writing to disk, or perhaps doing some multimedia kind of functionality, such as playing videos or playing sound files. I know that with the JavaScript on the actual HTML page itself, we can have the video tag or the audio tag, and we can play video and audio using these tags in HTML. But I think using a web view in something like perhaps Android Studio, then, or the equivalent, then perhaps we might need to perhaps build some kind of backend functionality, or perhaps I want to be able to run some kind of interop with the native device, such as perhaps using the camera or the sound recorder, or perhaps using GPS, which isn't available natively within JavaScript inside the browser. So we all have our different needs in terms of the type of application we're trying to build. So when we ask this question, what is the best programming language for me? I think each of us will have a different answer. So at the moment, I don't have an answer. I'm still trying to decide between the different programming languages that are available to me and to my skill set. And of course, we're all different in terms of our skill sets. So of course, each of us have a different answer. But in this video, I'll be just going through the reasons and trying to decide which one is best for me according to my situation, my needs, my requirements, and my skill set. So in terms of what I'm trying to achieve in terms of building apps to run on mobile phones, I think that is my primary objective. But as well as that, I'm looking also to build apps that run on the desktop, inside Windows, and possibly inside Mac OS, and also inside Linux. But I'm looking to compile everything from the same code base. So I don't want to be writing different source code for different platforms. I don't want to be writing, let's say, in one language and then for the mobile phone, and then having to rewrite the exact same app in a different language, just so that I want it to run on Windows or Mac OS or Linux. So what are the options that are currently available? Well, I think the most obvious kind of choice for me at the moment is Java inside Android Studio. I have been developing mobile phone apps using Java inside Android Studio with the web view. So that is my background. So I could decide to continue using Java, but after having developed applications using Java for several years, I'm now starting to perhaps look further afield in terms of my other options that are available to me besides Java, because I think at the moment I am facing certain drawbacks when I'm using Java. First is that if I've written an app inside Java, inside Android Studio, then it's not a straightforward process as far as I'm aware to port that to Windows. For example, I don't think I can compile a mobile phone app written inside Java in Android Studio into a Windows.exe file, even though the Android Studio IDE itself is installed inside the Windows environment. I think I do have the option of perhaps using a different IDE and perhaps importing different libraries and perhaps using different configurations in other Java IDEs which are available, but I don't know whether it's possible to compile to .exe file because I've not done research for that. So I'm not aware of specifically any other IDE that can compile a Java application to an exe. I know that we can do this using the JRE. I think if we use a command line and run JRE, we can perhaps compile and build to some kind of .exe file, and this is probably available in some other IDEs other than Android Studio. And if I tweak Android Studio enough, I might be able to perhaps get the Java compiler to perhaps build the Java runtime into the actual final executable. So I've not really explored that option, but to me this seems rather complicated and involves a lot of different procedures and reconfiguration of the project each time I wish to build something. other than just the standard APK or the standard AAB for a mobile phone app. I think the Android Studio IDE is a fantastic environment to develop in, and I would recommend developing apps in the Android Studio to anyone if they're looking to develop apps for the mobile phone. But I would say that if you are looking to develop apps using the Android Studio, I think you would need at least 16 gigabytes rather than something like 8 gigabytes, which I had initially. Because what I was doing was that I found that when I tried to run the emulator where we can test the actual app in the emulator within the Android Studio IDE, it was taking more than 5 minutes to actually run the app. And when it does that, it errors back saying that the attempt to run the app has stalled because it has taken more than 5 minutes because of the 8 gigabytes of RAM. Therefore, I recommend that we need to have at least 16 gigabytes in order to be able to use the emulator inside the Android Studio. So I think that is the current situation regarding Java. I wish to compile to Windows EXE and to Linux binary, and also possibly to Mac OS using the same code base, and I don't think at the moment using Java a straightforward simple option is available to me, which is why perhaps I'm looking to my next language that I'm considering, which is Kotlin. And I think Kotlin is looking very promising because I've heard that there is now this new multi-platform library that enables the Kotlin app that is inside the Android Studio to be able to compile to Windows.exe using this new package called Compose. So I'm very interested in looking into that, into finding more about it and exploring what is involved in terms of using the same code base, whether I can compile to an AAB file, and after that, without a lot of additional steps after importing this multi-cross-platform library, whether I can just simply select a few options and then compile the same project into an exe file that runs on Windows. In terms of the speed performance of a Java application compared to a Kotlin application, I think that Java is slightly faster than Kotlin in terms of speed tests. I think the differences are only marginal. Another language that is looking very promising in terms of being able to develop apps across different platforms to run on the mobile phone and also to run on Windows and Linux is Golang. I've actually managed to compile and create an APK file using Golang using the library which is called Fyne, spelled Fyne, and run that app successfully on my mobile phone. So we can use Golang or Go to develop mobile apps with. And using the same Fyne GUI library, I was able to also create an exe file that runs inside Windows and also inside Linux. So that is another very promising option to use Golang as my development language. But having said that, I'd be doing this using my own editor. I use Vim normally inside Tmux, and I'm not sure about the availability of perhaps some kind of syntax lint for Golang inside Vim, but perhaps that's something that I might need to look into if I do decide to go for Golang. In terms of the performance of the final compiled binary, Golang is the fastest. If we compare Golang, Java, and Kotlin, I think number one, it's Golang the fastest, followed by Java, followed by Kotlin. Another option that is looking really promising to me is Python. As a Vim user, I really like the fact that it's so easy to develop Python using Vim. And we don't have to do this using a computer with 16 gigabytes of RAM. We can use it on a computer with 8 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes of RAM because the actual programming environment using Python is so efficient and so minimal in terms of memory usage. I don't mind not using a graphical IDE in order to build GUI interfaces using Python because I'm really used to just developing everything on the command line and using Vim and just testing it and tweaking the actual code in order to configure the actual GUI side of things. And using PyInstaller, we can create binary executables to run on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. And using the Buildozer package, we can compile the Python project into an Android APK or AAB file as well. So in terms of cross-platform development on the very exact same code base without any change or hardly any change, we can create executables that run on the mobile phone, on Windows, on Linux, and on Mac OS. But in terms of the speed performance of the app itself, I think if we compare Go or Golang, Java, Kotlin, and Python, I think Python is the most inefficient or the slowest by far. of the four of them. So that is one perhaps drawback with Python. But I think in terms of the applications that I'm trying to write, I'm not trying to write something that involves like millions of calculations. If I'm just trying to write a basic user interface and a basic kind of app, I think there isn't really much difference in terms of speed or noticeable difference between Python or Golang, to be honest. So I think I might as well just do everything in Python if it's more convenient for me. If I don't need a really souped up computer with 16 gigabytes of RAM, if I have like a spare computer in the background with just minimal 4 gigabytes of RAM, I think that's more than sufficient to be able to develop an app for the mobile phone. I think in terms of if we wish to compile to AAB or APK file that runs on the mobile phone, I think 4 gigabytes of RAM perhaps isn't sufficient, because I think we'll get an error message if it's time is out in terms of the compilation time. Possibly, I think I've encountered an error message when I tried to build it on a computer that doesn't have much memory with about 4 gigabytes. It just timed out and it just exited with an error. But I'll try to do the same inside a computer with 8 gigabytes of RAM, then it compiled to an APK file without any issues whatsoever. Just mention that if we wish to compile to an APK file from a Python project, then it needs to be done inside Linux. I've tried to do it inside the Windows subsystem for Linux, and I just got this error message, possibly because I was using 8 gigabytes of RAM. But when I did it on a computer that was solely running Linux with 16 gigabytes of RAM, then it compiled without any issues using Bulldozer into an APK file for the mobile phone. Another drawback that I found with Python was that after I installed it on my mobile phone, in terms of loading the actual app itself, then it took about, on average, 5 seconds to load the app, which I think is slightly slow, because when I've developed apps normally, it takes about 2 seconds to load the apps, which I think is normal. I think if we just build it inside pure Java or inside pure Kotlin without the web view, then I think it just loads instantly. The actual dashboard, the main screen of the app just loads like within 1 second. If we use web view, then I think it takes about 2 seconds. But when I've done it using the Bulldozer for Python, it's taken normally more than 5 seconds, 5 to 6 seconds to load the app itself. So I think that is pretty slow. And I was done using the Kivy Python GUI library. But once again, depending on the type of app, it might be that 5 seconds is not an issue for most end users. So these are my kind of main serious options so far. So I'm looking possibly to write my next mobile phone apps using in order of likelihood. Possibly at the first it would be Kotlin, at the second it would be Golang, and thirdly it could be Python. I'm currently writing my apps inside Java, and I'm looking to move over from Java to one of these three, simply because of the lack of options that I'm aware of at the moment in terms of building cross-platform apps using the same code base. Another language that I'd like to mention in this video is PHP, because I have spent quite some time just exploring what are the options of developing in PHP if I wish to develop an app that runs on the mobile phone. I think if we have been developing, let's say, websites or web apps on the internet using PHP and HTML and JavaScript, and we wish to turn those web apps into web apps that run locally on the computer without any connection to the internet inside the browser, inside Windows or Linux or Mac OS. I think this is achievable using the FAR option. We can compile the entire PHP app into a single FAR file. It'll be able to archive all the assets such as videos, the graphics, the images, the sounds, as well as the PHP files into a single FAR file, .phar file. But once installed into the actual end user's computer, then we would need to be able to extract those assets such as the videos, audio files, and the images out into the file system, because we won't be able to use them directly from within the archive. We need to extract them out, and we would have to refer to them using the native file system, the computer. But if you've seen one of my earlier videos regarding doing this, using the FAR file on the Windows system, then in terms of the runtime that we need to deploy, it came to a total of about 10.5 megabytes that we need to deploy in addition to the actual FAR file, which I think is absolutely amazing. So if I were to perhaps develop apps for customers inside PHP to run on Mac OS, Windows or Linux, then I'd be perhaps looking to PHP as a serious contender. But I think the drawback here is that I've not yet found a satisfactory solution for compiling a PHP app into an APK or AAB file. that runs on a mobile phone. So unfortunately, even though I've been spending years and years developing using PHP, I don't think it'll be the programming language that I'll be using to develop my next mobile phone apps. I've heard that in terms of compiling HTML and JavaScript apps to a mobile phone APK or AAB file, I think this is possible using React Native, but I've tried doing that. I've followed the steps to actually do that, and for that, one would still need to use Android Studio according to the actual procedure that I followed. And even then, I was unsuccessful, possibly because I was using it on my computer with 8 GB of RAM. If I tried again using 16 GB of RAM, then I think I would have encountered a lot more success than I did. So that's about it for this video. Just my thoughts on what programming language I should use in order to develop my next mobile phone apps. And at the moment, in order of likelihood, these seem to be, first of all, Kotlin, and then Golang, and then Python. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Until next time, look after yourself and have a nice day.